Chapter 7. The Mouth of the Earth. The strike team moved through the jungle in the last hour before dusk. 40 soldiers under Nunez's command cutting a careful path toward coordinates that, 6 days earlier, had existed on no map any of them had ever seen. 2 Black Hawks idled in a clearing a kilometer back, engines hot, ready to extract on short notice. Overhead, invisible but present, a pair of Super Tucanos held station at altitude, waiting on a call that everyone hoped would not come tonight. Not here, not yet, not until Command of Brasilia had made the decision that hung, unspoken, over every soldier on the ground. If the strike order came, it would come down on top of them. "This is the spot," Frank said quietly, crouched beside Nunez at the edge of the clearing. The massive rock formation rising ahead of them exactly as he remembered it, the circular mouth of the cave a black wound in the gray stone. "We came out this way. There." He pointed to a scorched, trampled stretch of ground near the entrance. That's where the ropes were. Alan had insisted on coming, over the objections of the base medic and, quietly, of Frank himself. He stood a little apart from the group, staring at the cave mouth with an expression none of the soldiers around him could quite read. Not fear exactly, though there was plenty of that in him too, but something closer to a debt he intended to collect. "Dr. Ferreira's working theory," Nunez said, low, for Frank and Alan's benefit as much as his own soldiers, "is that whatever is still down there returns to ground before dawn, regardless of what happens tonight. If that's true, our window to do meaningful reconnaissance before this becomes an airstrike problem is closing fast. And if it's not true," Frank asked, "then we find out the hard way, same as everything else about this," Nunez said, and gestured his team forward. They were 50 meters from the entrance, moving in careful bounds between cover, when the ground itself seemed to exhale. It came as a pressure first, the same low, grinding vibration Alan remembered from the chamber, felt through the soles of his boots before it was heard at all, and then the cave mouth disgorged them. Not one, not a handful, but a dozen at once, shapes surging up out of the dark in a chaotic, thrashing mass of wings and claws, shrieking as they broke into the open air. Contact. Multiple hostiles, cave entrance, open fire. Nunez was already moving, dragging Alan bodily behind a fallen tree trunk as the jungle erupted into gunfire around them. It was nothing like the perimeter battle at the base, where the creatures had come at them across open ground with room to maneuver. Here, in the tangled dark beneath the canopy, everything happened at brutal, close range. A soldier 3 positions down screamed as one of them dropped on him from the branches above, and 2 others turned their weapons on it without hesitation, cutting it down before it could do more than tear his shoulder open. "Fall back to the tree lean, from a firing line. Don't let them get behind us," Nunez bellowed, and the soldiers responded with the discipline of men who had already survived one night like this and had no intention of repeating the parts that hadn't worked. Frank had a rifle in his good hand, handed to him by a soldier without a word, an unspoken understanding that a man who had already faced these things once wasn't going to sit this out, and he fired into the mass of shapes still spilling from the cave mouth with a grim, focused fury that had nothing left in it of the biology student who had once packed bear mace as a precaution against jaguars. The creatures fought differently than they had at the base. Alan noticed some detached part of his mind cataloging it even through the terror. Faster, more frantic, less coordinated, as though something about tonight, the third night, had stripped away whatever patience had governed their earlier hunting. They didn't circle or stalk. They simply came, in a relentless, shrieking wave, and died in the wave too, dozens of them cut down by disciplined fire from a firing line that held, barely, through sheer volume of ammunition and refusal to break. It was Alan who saw the last of them. It came out of the cave mouth alone, while after the others, moving slower, almost staggering, as though the night's hunting or the fighting or something else entirely had cost it more than the rest. It paused at the threshold of the cave, wings half spread, and turned its ruined, half-formed face toward the firing line, toward Alan specifically. He was almost certain, though he could never afterward explain why he believed that. Then it turned and dragged itself back into the dark, disappearing into the tunnel exactly as the eastern sky, faint but unmistakable, began to pale toward dawn. The gunfire sputtered out in ragged bursts, then silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of soldiers checking magazines with shaking hands and the moans of the wounded being dragged back toward the tree line. "Cease fire! Cease fire! Hold position!" Nunez's voice carried across the clearing, hoarse with the effort of the last 20 minutes. He turned in a slow circle, taking stock. 4 dead that he could see, 6 more wounded, the ground in front of the cave mouth littered with the fallen, gray-black wings tangled among broken branches and spent brass. "That's it," Frank said, staring at the cave entrance, now silent and dark, giving up nothing. Ferrer was right. They're going back. "Then command needs to know, right now, that this is the moment," Nunez said, already reaching for his radio. "If Ferrer's story is true and the ones still alive down there have gone back to sleep, we may never have a better window than this. No more of them in the open air to worry about. Just the cave." He keyed the transmitter. "Command, this is Nunez, requesting immediate relay to operational command. We've confirmed the source location and observed what appears to be a mass retreat into the cave system at dawn. Recommend." He paused, glancing once at Alan and Frank, at the wounded being loaded onto stretchers, at the 4 still forms zipped into bags a few meters away. "Recommend we finish this." Alan didn't say anything. He was looking at the cave mouth, at the dark, silent throat of the earth that had swallowed Deborah and Allison and Derek and Peter and Jack, that had nearly swallowed him too, and he found, somewhere beneath the exhaustion and the grief he hadn't let himself feel yet, that he agreed with the captain completely. Whatever it took to close that door, he wanted it closed. Behind them, as the first true light of dawn broke over the jungle canopy, the swollen red moon finally set, and for the first time in 3 nights, the sky above the Amazon held nothing but ordinary, empty blue. It would not stay that way for long. But for a handful of hours, at least, the survivors of the 3rd night were left to count their dead in peace.